Thank you for having me here. I'm psyched to be here. I'm psyched to be in Vancouver. Such an awesome city. So as Clayton said, I'm VP of Marketing at HubSpot. HubSpot is a marketing, sales, and service platform that really kind of covers the full customer experience. We've got customers I've got 65,000 customers all around the world. We've been around for just a little over a decade. And in that time, we had some really big wins. We've made some really smart choices. We've also had some gaffes. We've had some missteps along the way. And that's okay, because breakthroughs, they don't come from good places. Breakthroughs come from essentially being utterly and totally blocked. And you don't get through that unless you have that experience. The truth is, unless you're having a few, wait a minute, are we doing this all wrong moments, you're probably doing something wrong. And so what I'm going to talk through today are some of those moments that we had where we had to stop ourselves and say, God, it seems like something's not right here, and adjust our strategy. My hope is that by me sharing our mistakes or our missteps, you guys can just leapfrog over that and then hit your other mistakes and missteps and then share it to somebody else. So I'm giving you the cliff notes. The reason why this happens, why this will always happen to anyone in growth, is that this industry moves incredibly fast. Consumer expectations shift all the time. But you have these best practices that just kind of get stuck. And they worked at some stage, and people just hang on to them, and hang on to them, and hang on to them, and keep rerunning that playbook. And that is where a lot of these mistakes come from. In fact, everything you hear today is really a practice and a strategy that worked once that then overstayed its welcome. Make sense? Cool. All right, so let's dive right into the first one. Call this old is the new new, also known as the hipster's content strategy. As Clayton mentioned, HubSpot really built its business on content. We recognized very early on how active people are in searching and researching their companies, and so we got a first mover advantage in generating a really robust content strategy. And that has paid off dividends today. I still am a massive believer in investing in content. It is the first hire I would make on a marketing team. It is the only marketing strategy out there that compounds over time, meaning the thing that you write today will bring you traffic from this point until well beyond when you've left the company. So, huge believer in content strategy. The challenge was we were so good at content strategy that after a while, for every problem that arose, our answer was very simple. Put a blog on it. We created a ton of content. Every month, every number we wanted to hit, the answer was more content, volumes of content, as much content as you can see. And that rationale was sound, right? It came from a good place. We saw it in our own numbers. We also surveyed our customers. We surveyed other marketers outside, and we found that companies that published 16 or more blog posts per month got almost 3.5 times more traffic than companies that published between 0 to 4 monthly posts. So this was a good, solid strategy. More content equals more traffic, right? Here's the problem with that. There's only 2 ways to move that needle. Either you have your content team write more and more content until they keel over and die, not optimal, or you grow your content team more and more and more until your budget keels over and dies. Also not optimal. And we did a little bit of both, to be honest. We hired a probably bigger content team than we needed to in the beginning. Those writers were exceptional. They worked really, really hard. But our game was a volumes game. In fact, there was a point in 2015 where we were publishing about 10 posts a day. Now you think about your schedules, and you don't have enough time to write 10 posts a day, let alone read 10 posts a day from a single company. And so we were really in the volume game. And then a woman on our blogging team had an observation. This woman's name was Pam Vaughn. You should look her up, but please do not recruit her. I love her, and I will come after you. And she said, hey, guys, has anyone ever noticed that 92% of our leads and 75% of our traffic in a given month come from posts that were published prior to that month? And then she made it look like this. Because this was the insight that led to the breakthrough. Now think about it. In a given month, before we even set foot into that month, we know that 92% of the leads for that month are going to come from content we published a month ago, a year ago, 5 years ago. Same goes for traffic. 76% of our traffic is going to come from old stuff. And when we dug in deeper, and when Pam dug in deeper, what she found was it was really about 30 posts in our entire history of content that was bringing in the muscle, the lion's share of our traffic and leads. Now, when those numbers are staring you right in the face, when they're looking right back at you, the only logical question is, why on earth are 100% of our content creators focused on new stuff if 92% of our leads come from old stuff? That's a mismatch. And so we made a shift in the way that we approach content strategy. Sure, we still had bloggers that would create new content, go after new topics and new themes. But we also repositioned some members of our team to optimize old content. Here's what I mean when I say that. So first of all, those 30 posts, you better believe we went back and we optimized the heck out of those posts. We made them the best posts on the internet for that topic. Then we went and we looked at every post that was ranking well on search, but was converting not so well. And we went back and created new conversion paths out of those posts, made it clearer, matched up an offer better, that kind of thing. Then we looked at posts that were converting really well but not ranking so well, and we search engine optimized the heck out of those. And then along the way, we also looked for posts that were just outdated, and we added new stats, new examples, new best practices that better reflected the times. And that became the full-time job of some people on our team. That one shift, optimizing the old instead of just writing for new, led to a major change in the amount of traffic and leads we got from our content. So just for the old content that we optimized, we more than doubled the number of monthly leads that we generated out of that content. It's a big, meaningful difference. We increased our number of organic search views to those old posts by 106%. This was a small change relatively in the way that we structured our team that woke us up and reinvigorated our growth. So I would say, as you are building your content strategies, as you're building your marketing teams, certainly focus in getting new content out there, optimizing that content. But, you know, if you're anything beyond 1 year in, start to look back and look at what is actually working in your old content and try to get more out of that content because it makes a meaningful difference. In short, it brought us more views with less content. And doing that allowed us to shift out of this world where we're publishing 5, 10 posts a day into a world where we're publishing a lot more reasonable content. And that content is better and more optimized to deliver us our value. So that's one. Everybody with me on that? All right. Shift number 2. It's the structure, silly. So when I joined HubSpot in 2011. This is a look at our traffic since that time, up to 5 years after 2011. We were sitting pretty. We were looking pretty good in terms of the efficacy of our marketing and content strategy. In fact, that big hockey stick moment that you see right around 2015, that is a result of the strategy I just walked through, optimizing the old and getting more value out of your content. So this is looking pretty good, right? I should take this and I should put it on my LinkedIn profile, and that should be it for me. And I should retire. And I would have done that, except then 2017 happened. A time that I would like to refer to as the great plateau of 2017, a marketer's worst nightmare. And you know, you rationalize this, you call it seasonal, you call it a phase, you do everything except to look yourself in the face and say something is wrong here. until time keeps passing and it keeps hanging on there. So then you have a moment of realization, and you know that something has to change. That strategy you were working with, even the great one where you optimize old content, is no longer working as well as it used to. So I did what any professional would do, and I panicked. Panicked for a good, what felt like a good period of time. And then something magical happened. I saw a blog post from Moz, and they were sharing the total organic sessions to Moz.com. You guys see what I'm seeing here? I noticed a similar flattening of the curve. And then WordPress shared the page views of their entire ecosystem of WordPress sites. Similar flattening. And then all of a sudden, the light bulb went off, and I realized, with a great fat grin on my face, it wasn't just me. Something was wrong with the internet. Yes! When that happens, when you sort of realize that something bigger is going on, you shift from fear to curiosity. That's when stuff gets really good, because that's when you can unpack what's actually going on and learn from it. So suddenly me and the entire team were Sherlock freaking Holmes, and we're trying to uncover what changed in the internet. The answer is a whole bunch of stuff that didn't just change in 2017, but really kind of hit a tipping point in 2017. I'll name a couple of them. Number one, we used to get a lot of traffic from social media. Social media was a channel. It meant that you would write a blog post, you would send that link out on Twitter or Facebook or what have you. People would click through and they would get back to your site. Traffic. By 2017, all of those social sites were more like closed walls. Facebook had instant articles. Nobody was clicking through on Twitter. You couldn't even get a link into Instagram. The traffic on those social networks was staying on those social networks. That's one big change. Another big change that happened was Google just fundamentally changed the way that it approached search engine results. Not only did its algorithm change, but also the landscape of the search engine results page changed. And I'll get into that in a minute. And behavior was just changing as well. And so all of this sort of accumulated in a tipping point in 2017. We needed to change too. So we made some pretty big changes to our structure as a team. We made some pretty big changes to our structure as a site, and we made some pretty big changes to our structure of content. I'm going to get into each of these pretty quickly. So the first thing we did was we merged the SEO and blog team. Now I know that we were a bigger company at this stage. A lot of you are earlier stage companies. You may not even have, you may have one marketer. But the mentality is what I'm talking about here, because before we had writers who wrote, and then we had SEO people who would go back in and try to optimize that content after the fact. When we merged the team, the process looked something like this. So every quarter, we'd have a Search Insights report. We still do. The SEO parts of our team put that together. And they figure out where's the opportunity. They determine, should we update existing content or should we write new content to fill that opportunity? They suggest a title and an H2. They suggest a URL, and they suggest something that we call a snippet style, which I can get into in a minute. And they put this all in a spreadsheet, and then the writers then pull from this spreadsheet. And they run it through editorial guidelines. We're not going to write on or publish something just because it ranks. We're going to publish things that rank and also mesh with our editorial agenda, with things that we think our audience will care about. They do the research, the writing, the editing. By working together out of this same spreadsheet, by unifying those efforts, we're making stuff that is optimized much stronger from the get-go, and that matters. And that matters because of this. This may be a little bit hard for some of you guys to see, but this is the change that Google made beginning in 2017 to the search engine results page. They moved the ads that used to be on the side of the page into the center column. So that meant that everything moved down below the ads. Then they introduced snippets in a major way. Snippets are these little answer boxes that you sort of see in the second box down. That takes up a huge portion of the real estate. When you add those two things in, your ranking number one for a search term means way less than it used to. Because that line at the very bottom of the page here, that is the fold. So we were working our asses off to rank #1, and we were still basically at the fold of a page. And this is on a desktop. On mobile, you're not even anywhere near view. So Google really changed their structure. We needed to change to match that. The second thing that we changed in our structure is not the structure of our team, but the structure of our website. So this is what our website kind of used to look like. HubSpot.com, our biggest traffic driver was the blog, and then we had 3 sort of sub-blogs underneath that. They all accumulated in this big pile of content. That didn't work in this modern search strategy. And so what we decided to do was, if it was going to be harder to rank, we needed to rank better for those things. So we rolled out what we called the pillar and cluster model. And here's how that works. We identified broad topics, not long tail keywords, broad topics. We were looking for things in our footprint that had a monthly search volume of 15,000 or above on topics that mattered to our organization. And then we consolidated all the existing content we had around that topic. So, for example, going back to our first mistake, we had 15 posts. This is not an exaggeration. 15 posts on how managers can encourage social selling. You don't need 15 posts on that. And if you have 15 posts on that, turns out they're going to compete with each other for search ranking. And so we consolidated a bunch of them. We redirected them into the best post. We really beefed up that post, and we made that the pillar content for that subject. Then we clustered related posts around that pillar topic. And we linked the keyword back into the pillar post. Finally, we cleaned out every other internal link in that supporting content, deleted those other internal links so that the only link that's internal from that content was going back to that pillar post. External, things linking off to other sites, no problem. It's the internal linking that made the big difference. So what that meant, it looked a little bit like this. So you have your pillar content, your best piece on social selling, surrounded by other content that are more the longer tail keywords, but lesser in your mind than that first post. Hyperlinks back into it using the keyword. So here's an example of what that looks like. I know it's hard to talk in abstracts. This is an example of what this could look like. So you do a pillar piece of content, a single page on the best workout routines, and then you have other content around that, around best workout routines for moms, or to get abs, or to increase strength, and that all links back into it. The result was, this was heavy lifting for us because remember, we had just infinite amounts of content on our site. We had to go back in and actually rebuild the entire site and the way it was structured. But as a result, we went from looking like this to looking like this. This was much cleaner and easier for Google to follow. And that made our content rise up in the search rankings. It also made it easier to update that content because we knew what was the most powerful piece in that cluster. Now, this was hard work, as I said, but before I get into the snippets, but what I will tell you is it was hard. 2 things. One, it was worth it. The change in our traffic, it was the single thing that busted us out of that plateau. There's a bunch of other stuff in this section. This pillar cluster model was what got us out of the great flattening of 2017 and put us back onto a very strong trajectory of growth up till today. 2, it is not going to be as hard for almost everybody, I could say, sitting in this room, because you do not have the amounts of content that we had. At that point, we had been around for 10 years. We had 10 years of content, from a time in which we were publishing 10 times a day. So we just had a lot more content to do. Doing this for us took like a year. If you are just getting started, you can build it from the beginning. Or if you're a couple years in, it might be a project you can spin up in a month to really fundamentally change the way that your site is structured and traffic gets to your site. Okay, the third thing we did on structure, and then I'll move on to my final lesson, is we captured the snippet all damn day. We went after the snippet. We got mad at the snippet because it was stealing our traffic, and then we captured it. I'll tell you what I mean by that. All right. So I mentioned already that snippets in Google search are like these little answer boxes that you see now for a lot, more than a third, probably closer to a half of all search terms now surface some sort of a snippet. And this is what it looks like. So this top box here gives you the majority of the answer that you're going to need. Now, when these first rolled out, we all thought like, oh, this is really bad, because this means people are going to get the answer that they need right on Google, and they're not going to click through. And so at first, we kind of didn't know what to make of the snippet, and we certainly didn't really want to get into it because we wanted that traffic coming back to our site, not being consumed on Google's site. But then we started to see just how much the snippets were eating our traffic. The numbers here are a little small, so I'll read them for you. So these were 3 highly ranked posts. First on Excel, the second on job interviews, the third on Instagram. The Excel post dropped from 78,000 visits in a month to 48,000 in 2017. The job interview questions post dropped from 49,000 to 32,000. Instagram from 76,000 to 57,000. This is where that plateau came from. These are real numbers on a monthly basis that are eating away at our traffic. And so this was a problem. So we decided to run an experiment to see, would our traffic go up or would it go down if we actually were surfaced in the snippet? And by the way, in each of these, we were the #1 organic search result beneath the snippet. So it's not like we weren't doing a good job with the content. So I'll tell you what we did in a minute, but I want to give you the punchline first. When in the cases where we were able to capture the snippet, where our content surfaced in that little answer box, we had been worried about what would happen to the click-through rate. Turns out the snippet is still just a preview. People are actually clicking through on those. They're not just getting the answer in most cases and walking away. So when we were able to capture it, the click-through rate to our website increased by more than 114%. That's even when we previously ranked #1 in organic search. So getting into the snippet is a good thing, at least for this stage, not a bad thing. So how do you do it? I'm going to skip through the simple answer because you all are advanced and get to the more nitty-gritty details of how we did it. All right, so we used a tool called SEMrush. There are lots of tools out there that you can use for this, but that was the one we used, to identify the keywords that had a featured snippet. And then to look at those to figure out which are the ones that we felt like we had a good shot at ranking for. And that same crew that was optimizing old content, we put them on this project. So what they went back in optimizing that content, they added the question and the answer really explicitly into the content. They kept their paragraphs in that answer really short, less than 50 words, less than 7 bullets for how-to. They included the search term wherever possible. And there were slightly different rules for different types of snippets. So carousels and image snippets were easier to get, so we went after those. Things like that. Probably the most impactful thing here, though, is they kept the code clean. So you'll see, again, really small, but this is sort of a before and after. The top is before, the bottom is after, on how our content had been written before, when it was written just by writers, and how it was written after when we started to optimize for snippets. So Google snippets I'm saying snippet a lot, I'm so sorry. If this were an afternoon thing, that could turn into a drinking game. Google somehow likes LI for their bullets as opposed to OL, so we made sure to do that. We were really clear about like our divs and our H2s and made sure that the hierarchy was there. The cleaner code, the better our chances were at getting into the snippet. And we were deliberate about it. You know, we decided which ones we wanted to go after, and we went after them. And as a result, before I dive into that, you know, we were able to buck out of that plateau. We had our highest traffic month ever, but certainly in a while accelerated our growth just this last May. Had like a massive traffic month, all because of some of these changes to wake up the curve that we had in our growth. We always have this debate around, you know, is this it? Did we do it? Like, did we hit the ceiling? And this, what we're seeing right now is just like there's no more marketers to read our content in the world. There's no more people to reach. There's always that debate that happens inside HubSpot because our numbers have gotten bigger now. And the answer is always no. It's always no. It's just that when you hit that, what feels like a ceiling, you need to look back and figure out what was it that used to work that no longer works as well anymore. How do you change that? All right, our final shift and final sort of outdated practice. So this one is really about change and being open for it, especially once you feel like you figured out what you're doing, needing to go back and change again. This one I call, sometimes you just got to rebuild the spaceship mid-galaxy. So, you know, a couple years ago, things were looking pretty good again for the growth of our business. We were growing 30 to 40% year over year. There was nothing inherently wrong about what we were doing. But we noticed that even though we were still doing okay, there was a shift in the way that people wanted to research and buy from companies. Our model started that way. We started because we realized people didn't like to be interrupted with a bunch of outbound advertising or marketing, and they'd rather find useful, relevant content. And that's sort of what launched us as a company, is this realization that the way people had shopped and bought had changed. But when you realize that, what you have to also realize is that's not going to be the last time that happens. And so in 2014, 2015, we realized that, like, wow, it had really changed again, and we weren't prepared for that. So in 2006, we were all about solving for interruptive marketing tactics, creating content that people would want to search for, bringing people into the site that way. In 2014, we realized that, like, what we had been doing, which was put a piece of content on the internet, guard it with a form, have people fill out 1 million details to get at that piece of content, then pass them over to a nurturing program, send them a bunch of emails, and then pass them over to a sales rep, have that person call once or twice or 3 times to actually slowly warm them up. That drawn-out sales process was just falling out of favor with a lot of consumers. And we hadn't seen it hit our numbers yet, but we knew we would. So we decided to completely change our go-to-market 10 years in as a business. Or actually, at that point, it wasn't 10, but far in as a business. We introduced a new free product, free CRM, free marketing tools, free sales tools, and we started to shift from what was a marketing and sales-driven process to what became a product-driven process. So you don't need to talk to anybody, just get our software for free and use it. And then one day, let the software, when you get enough value out of the software, you'll want to upgrade. We introduced a freemium process, which I'm guessing a lot of you in this room already have. The problem was we had this new product-driven go-to-market that we were trying to get off the ground, and we had the existing inside sales go-to-market, and they were all using the same resources. It wasn't like we suddenly had a big influx of money to go pursue a new go-to-market. And that's tough, because you've got a whole sales team and a whole business that is based in this other model. So how do you introduce the new path? 2 things. First, you have to test the heck out of the new go-to-market until it's predictable. You can't just introduce this thing, throw it into, one-for-one swap it out or throw it into your core strategy unless you can trust that it's going to work. And so we spun up a separate team, completely isolated, and allowed them to build this product, build this go-to-market, and test it until we could rely on the results. So this is some examples of some of the tests they ran, testing different types of product conversions. So is there a difference between when somebody within the free product clicks on a CTA in the free product for a paid feature from when they're triggered by tripping over a usage cap to when they upgrade for a grayed out feature? Those sorts of things we tested. And I'm not going to go into this today because we don't have enough time. There's a guy named Kieran Flanagan on my team who ran this effort and has written extensively about all of these experiments. You can search for Kieran Flanagan PQL, and you'll find it. We probably have a pillar page for it somewhere. But the reason I'm not going into this is actually not a lesson about conversion rates. This is a lesson about learning to pivot as a scale-up. And a lot of you in the room today are probably early stage. Pivoting is not that big of a deal early stage. It's a little bit more graceful, if you will. You have a new idea, you try something new, experimentation is a lot easier. But again, as you get bigger and bigger, and you all will, because you all have amazing companies, you will find that pivoting gets a lot harder. And so I would store this lesson away for that time, because the fear is going to be that it is too hard to pivot or to change your mind on a strategy, and you won't do it, and that will lead to just the slow disintegration of your growth. Pivots are necessary. They are just hard to pull off when you've got a team of people depending on you for the initial go-to-market. So we had that small team working on experiments, testing, completely protected and isolated, but then we had to make the existing go-to-market better and more efficient, because remember, they're sharing the same resources. So the more we could make the existing go-to-market more efficient, the more resources we could kick over to the experiment side. And so we did that in a number of different ways. We attacked the form. This was a view of our actual, an old form that we had. There's a lot of fields on here. And so we started to reduce fields by 1 or 2 to try to make an impact here. So this was stage 1 that we ran on the existing go-to-market side. We were able to get to a 5% higher conversion rate after reducing the form fields. Then we looked at our different paths into conversion. So we added multiple options for how to convert and talk to a sales rep. There was book a meeting options. There was chat that we added to the website. There was the traditional form. There was the traditional just give sales a call. A lot of times people, when I started in marketing, the whole mentality was reduce options. Options add friction. We don't want to give people choice. We just want to tunnel them down this one path. And that was true back then, but it just doesn't work today. Today, options matter, which is also why you don't wholesale switch out one thing for another. It's why we're still using forms on our site, because some people like to convert on forms. So if we had just switched entirely to chat or just switched entirely to meeting booking, we would have lost that. This is an actual view on that page of the different ways in which people convert. And so if you're only doing one of these, you've lost out on the rest of that pie. So by offering more connections, we were able to increase conversions. Connections actually talking to a sales rep by 170%. That was another area of efficiency. And then finally, we cut out the amount of time it took to rotate people to our sales team. There's a lot of fat in this, the timeline of rotating leads. It's worth taking a look at to try to cut some of that out. So by doing all these things, by increasing efficiency in our existing go-to-market, we were able to then invest in a new go-to-market and then kind of gradually introduce this into our strategy. By the end, we had 10x the number of self-service purchases of HubSpot. That's the new model, while still growing the inside sales model. So nothing suffered, nothing was sacrificed. So if you find yourself in need of a new spaceship, that is what I would advise. Small experiment group, while also not neglecting the existing go-to-market, finding efficiencies there. All right. So in conclusion, very simple. You are going to get blocked in your time as a growth professional, as a marketer. You need to find a way to break through that block. That is a sign from the universe that something is not working. Don't panic, get curious. You get blocked, you break through, and you become better. Thank you very much for your time. I'm Meghan Keaney Anderson.
I need some traction. You need some traction. Let's get some traction.